Hi, welcome to the Finland Post newspaper by Kids. Today we're interviewing Dr. Macedo. She studies climate change in the Amazon forest. That's amazing. Let's ask her some questions.
Why do you study climate change in the Amazon forest?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that question. I became interested in studying the Amazon forest because I am from Brazil. And so my grandparents were from Belém, which is at the mouth of the Amazon River. And ever since I was a little girl, I used to hear stories about the Amazon, and I got really interested in the wildlife and how the ecosystem worked. And so that kind of sparked my interest in the Amazon forest, and I decided to study that in school. And then I became aware that the Amazon is actually a really important part of the global climate. It helps control the climate in the region in South America, but also connects to the global climate. So it stores a lot of carbon, and it helps produce rainfall in the region because the trees help recycle the water from the rainfall back to the atmosphere and create clouds, and that comes back down and helps feed the rivers and all of the ecosystem, all of the ecological functions of the forest. So those connections I thought were really fascinating, and I became really interested in trying to find ways to save the forest, to make sure that it kept producing those functions. And yeah, so I'll stop there.
How does logging and growing crops impact a forest?
Well, logging and growing crops are two of the drivers of what we call deforestation, right? So it provides a reason for removing the forest, right? And one of the things that I study in my work is how soybean production, so crops for places around the world, interacts with forest removal in the region. So it actually, that and cattle ranching actually have both been really important economic forces that have led people to take the forests out to deforest, and one of the things that we study is exactly how that changes the climate and the water balance, right? That ties back to your first question a little bit. So yeah, they encourage deforestation, and one of the things that we have to do, I think, is to figure out a way to allow the forest to stay and to also grow food to feed people. So to balance those two things, because they both need to happen in order for us to have a thriving society. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit.
Do you think humans can live without cutting down forests?
Yes, I think they can. There are a lot of good examples of communities that live in ways that have kind of a light touch on the landscape, and that allow forests to stand, and the forests actually provide a lot of services, right? A lot of animals and plants that are useful to people. And so I guess I would turn that around and say that maybe I think humans can't live without the forest at some level. But it is challenging, right? I mean, there's a lot of competing interests and needs from the forest. And so we kind of have to negotiate that. So people who make a living from logging and from agriculture have a different motivation in terms of keeping the forest standing. People who live in the forest and use its resources, you know, obviously depend on that forest standing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there are solutions that could allow for both to happen, but they're not easy solutions. It takes a lot of creativity, maybe, and you know, I guess thoughtfulness to manage things so that both things can happen.
Why are the Amazon forests called the lungs of the planet?
So that's actually a little bit of misnomer. They are called the lungs of the planet because people have associated this idea of, you know, forests are trees are plants, right? And so they, unlike us, we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants actually, you know, during the day, but they photosynthesize, right? So during the day they breathe in CO2 and breathe out oxygen. And so I think that's why people got this idea that they produce oxygen and are kind of the lungs, if you will. But at night they breathe like us. They actually breathe in CO2, breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2, and so they're actually quite in balance. So one of the things that that people have it's sort of a myth, I guess, this idea that the forests actually produce more oxygen than they take up. It's not actually true, but they're in balance and they're really important to the balance of the ecosystem and of the atmosphere. So actually the oceans are more the lungs of the planet than the forests. They produce a lot of the algae in the ocean actually produce a lot of excess oxygen. But I mean, that's, you know, the forests, I think, of the Amazon are like an air conditioner, and they're also like a watering can, I guess, if you will, for the region, because they actually take the heat from the sun and use that energy to create forests and pump up water back to the atmosphere. And so they make their own clouds, they make their own rain, and they cool off the land surface. So yeah, so that's my long answer to that question. I think that, you know, for the Amazon, those are two really important things. So all the people growing food, crops, downwind from the Amazon actually depend on those forests because they need the rainfall to feed the crops.
Why did the Amazon fires start?
Why did they start? Most of the fires land this year are from deforestation. So they are often people who are moving into areas that they don't own and trying to show that the land belongs to them. And so they'll cut down the forest illegally, and then they let the trees dry, the felled trees dry, and then to clear that away and plant crops or put cattle or on the land, they will light it on fire to get rid of the biomass. That's what, like, the piled up trees. So yeah, so they're purposeful fires to get rid of brush that has been cleared. That is the big source of ignition. Some of those fires can escape if in a dry year. Some of them can escape accidentally into the standing forest, and that's a real problem. And it's very hard to control when that happens because, you know, it's so remote, so far away. It's hard to get people there to put out the fires, and so so yeah, it's really important to control those ignition sources. And because that deforestation is not legal, it's against the law, it's really worrisome. And we're trying to get people to stop it, you know, as the trees are coming down instead of only months later when the fires start.
Does it affect nature when you camp in the forest?
I think you can camp in the forest without affecting nature too much. I mean, yeah, I think if you're careful, that camping is actually a really great thing to do because it helps people. It's really good for people. The research shows that you know, it's good for your well-being. It makes you happier, but it also, I think, creates an appreciation for the forest and all of the interesting and really beautiful things that are there. And so from that standpoint, I think it can almost have a positive effect, right? Because if once you know something and you understand it and are curious about how it works, then you are more likely to want to protect it. So I think you can camp thoughtfully and not have too much of an impact.
What can children do to prevent climate change?
Ooh, that's a big question. I would say that one of the big things that kids can do to help prevent climate change is to get the adults in their lives to vote, to pay attention, and to ask their legislators and, you know, to vote people into office that can make large-scale change. Because at this point, we really need big systemic change, right? From the top, from governments. All together, we can make a big difference. But I think at this point we need to move really quickly, and that requires educating people, as you guys are doing. You know, getting the message out there about the science of climate change, as I try to do, but then also being active and kind of demanding the change that we need to happen from our leaders. So talk to your parents, talk to their friends, and get them out there to vote, especially this year, an election year. I think that's a really one concrete step. Yeah. You guys have.
How can we change our lives to help stop climate change?
How can you change your lives? Well, I think, as I said a little bit before, the root cause of climate change is too much carbon in the atmosphere, right? And so anything that can help reduce that is a step in the right direction. So, you know, riding your bikes instead of driving. I mean, I know you're not driving, but sort of encouraging people to do the same, using public transportation, you know, turning the lights off, like all of these sorts of things that sort of reduce the amount of energy that we use, and thinking about, you know, consuming a little bit less maybe, and you know, buying locally, these sorts of things that just sort of like, yeah, I mean, all of these little actions that reduce the amount of gasoline and fossil fuels that we need. I think we're seeing a shift right now to a lot of interesting technologies that can help us do that. So wind energy, solar energy, you know, electric cars, that kind of thing. We're seeing that become available around the country, around the world, and I think that's going to be a game changer. So anything that you can do to talk to people about those choices and how every choice has an impact on climate change, and every voice matters, including yours. I think that you can have a really powerful voice to get people to pay attention. How do you think about climate change? I mean, how do you think about yeah, I mean, change. What would you like to see happen from what you know about climate change?
I would say I think what I would like to happen would be like a lot of people like using bikes when they can, like, or even instead of getting bikes, if you have to go somewhere far, just get an electric car.
So cool. We learned a lot from you, and thank you for your time. Bye.